name is Meg, and please share your names.
My name is Evelyn Bacon Barnwell.
And I'm her son, Paul Barnwell. And we go to Trinity Episcopal Church, Pottsville.
Okay, Pottsville. Is that where you call home?
Yes.
Yes.
And what do you consider your hometown?
There's diversity-wise, there's not more than 2% minority. The population of Pottsville now is around 11,000 people. I think the minority population, with the advent of some jobs that came in, might have ticked up a little bit, but it remains very minimal. Like, for instance, a good way to view the diversity is see how many kids graduate from high school. And you'll only see a spattering. You know, if there's more than 3 black kids in one class, that's a lot these days. I was the only one in my class.
And in my class, it goes way back, I was one of 7, but there were like 200 people in my class. So we are a very small group. And
Okay. So did you both grow up in Pottsville?
yes,
Okay.
I was born in 1958, and my mother got married the previous year at Trinity Episcopal Church by Reverend Johnson. Exactly August 10th.
Okay.
When, she married my father.
yeah, but I was going to Trinity Episcopal prior to that, because I lived almost my entire life in Pottsville. Went to Philadelphia 6 months, didn't like it, came back home, and the rest of my life was spent here. Actually, we've been in this house, I've been in this house for 62 years. So, in all those years, I was going to Trinity. In my younger days, you know, you're on the choir. Oh. Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
moving on to the next question. So you are deeply rooted in Pottsville and Trinity.
Right. I was raised Baptist, but as I got older, it just wasn't giving me what I wanted. And that's when I went to the Episcopal Church.
Okay.
Because my sister and my brother had also been members of Trinity Episcopal before they moved on to relocate. But my portion of my adult, the whole portion of my adult life was spent in the Episcopal Church.
Megan, to back up just a little bit, in the mid-50s, her 2 older siblings went to Trinity Episcopal. They were disenfranchised with the Baptist Church. And sadly, I'm not quite sure why they chose Trinity Episcopal, but they did. Our books don't show them as communicants. My research showed nothing. It certainly shows my mother's wedding, and it shows my confirmation in 71. I was not baptized there because at the time my grandfather was the minister at the only remaining black church in this town, which is Bethel AME. So he baptized me. However, my whole life, all I know is Trinity Episcopal Church. So therefore, don't ask me to sing a Negro spiritual because I ain't got it.
Sometimes when I meet you a person, I'll tell you the story about that.
I love to sing, I just don't have that touch.
So what, Evelyn, what attracted you to the Episcopal Church?
Well, you know, I've gone there because my brother and sister were there. and they were happy with it. So my other sister and myself, we decided to go to the Episcopal Church also. And as the years went by, my mother, she also became an Episcopalian because her family had all left the Baptist church to become Episcopalian. So she became an Episcopalian too.
My grandmother was received in 1974, along with, I have 5 first cousins, and they moved here from Maine, and in 74, they all were confirmed at Trinity Episcopal. And that would have been still Father Johnson?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Wasn't Paul Hannaford yet?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
So we've been an Episcopal family for quite a number of years. And I've gone to the dentist, you know. I sang in the choir. I was on the vestry. We had a club there, like the Friendship Club. We organized dinners and stuff like that. You know, I was involved in all of that. But I only served one term on the vestry. So.
And likewise, going through the entire Sunday school system at the church, you know, I was on a junior choir, and as soon as I was large enough, I became an acolyte. And similar to my mother, vestry, we still had church. I still sang on the choir. I'm currently on the vestry. I'm a lay Eucharistic minister, and I'm a licensed lay reader, which is currently what I do in the church. Yeah, and I'm currently on the vestry there. But our history shows that there was a Watson family in the early 60s that we're pretty sure was a black family, but they did not stay. The Barnwells and the Bacons have been the only sustaining black family in that church since the 50s. Certainly since after I was baptized, the church I went to predominantly, I don't remember this of course, was the Episcopal Church. So it's the only church that I know. And I'm happy about that.
Was there something you liked more about the way the Episcopals did church versus the Baptist church?
Well, he can't answer that because he only knows one. But
right.
Yeah, the order of service was, you know, about the same. But being 17 at the time, I really didn't like being in church for 3 hours. You know, so it's one of those things, if you can't get it to me in at least an hour, then I've lost something. And a lot of the other young people my age were no longer going to church. You know, in our household, on a Sunday, you went to church. You never questioned that. So, you know, the population in the Baptist church, as far as young people, was diminishing. But, and you didn't have a say. Only, quote, quote, the elders had a say. Where you have a say, or I had a say in the Episcopal Church almost as soon as I got there. People wanted to know, you know, how I got there and made sure I was happy and all of that. So that was one reason I left, because we had no say, like I said. And we had, back at the day, was starting when I left, we couldn't even, like the Episcopal churches now, we couldn't afford a full-time priest or a preacher. And of course, he came up from Philadelphia every Sunday morning.
Now you're talking about the Baptist church right now.
Oh, yeah, I did. And she asked me why.
Okay,
So if you wanted to talk to him, there was no time. Because after service, he was back to Philadelphia. So, you were there, you were listening. No, maybe not listening, but you were there in body. And from day one, when mother said you sit still and be quiet, that's the way you were. So, I just didn't like that. You have your life is being governed, but you do not have a say in it. So.
I earlier mentioned Bethel AME Church. Now, Pottsville in the mid 60s went through a large urban renewal, so the Baptist church was actually raised. It no longer exists. It was a section of town called Barnwell Street. It had clubs, it had illicit things going on, and they just got rid of it. They absolutely just tore the whole thing down. And within that urban renewal, the Baptist church was raised. There's actually a detention center sitting about where it would have sat when I was a kid growing up. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's the old Baptist, the only Baptist church in the area. And then there were more young people actually in the Methodist church. And they had something, I'm trying to think of what they call it, but on Sunday night we would all meet and have like a little adult Sunday school. And that was in the Methodist church. So I think
Okay.
all together there.
Do you want to speak about the Lincoln House?
Well, Lincoln House came much later. No, it didn't. No. Because the Lincoln House, that was the only the black community center. But we did not basically wander off. Where I was born and raised, there were like 5 black families. And actually, we only came down to that Barnwell Street area to go to church on Sunday. And then they opened up the Lincoln House, and you could go there in the afternoon. It was open. There was recreation. I don't remember classes per se, except Miss Foster used to have classes. Mm-hmm. And but the older people could go. The older siblings could go there, and they could dance, and they had their own little thing that they could do. I guess it would be like the Y without a gym.
Okay.
If that makes sense to you, because we didn't go to the Y, we went to the Lincoln House.
So who opened the Lincoln House?
The people were down there was a Miss McKay and what's his name? Oh, I can't think of their name. And they were brought here and paid for by another organization. And they were in charge of the Lincoln House. And I think they even had a pool table in there for the kids. But you sort of caught me offhand because I remember she was Mrs. McKay, and I can't remember what his name was.
Okay.
So, but that was our that was our life. So
another thing to remember is that in the 40s, in the 40s, Pottsville was happening. There was a lot of nightclubs. Some of them located on Barnwell Street, all of them. There's a rail track that was put in so people from Philly could come up to Pottsville for a good time. We are not too far from Fort Indian Town Gap. All those GIs came down. So it was very popular. In fact, as you are well aware, Pearl Bailey got her start here in the club. A very dear friend was going to see God. He used to dance with her. And when she got the call to, become big and move, He stayed.
Her brother came, Bill Bell. He came, and the guy's name was Arlen. And he said, "Do you want to go?" And he said, "No, I'll stay here." It's, anytime you would go to see Pearl Bailey, and if you said you were from Pottsville, she would say, "How's Judy?" That was his nickname. Yeah. This is where she got her start.
And at that time, as my mother indicated, going back to the high school reference, you would see 7 or 8 black kids in a class. There's a lot more black families. We're all centered in what's called, and where we're talking to you from now, the 5th ward of Pottsville. That was the preponderance of where all the black people in this town live. Very few of us, very few families live anywhere else in this city. And which was fortunate, because as these entertainers were coming to town, they stayed with black families because they weren't allowed in the hotel. So it has a history. But like I mentioned, in the 60s, they said bye-bye, and they raised the whole area. So, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, and I guess whatever black history my brothers and sisters learned was at the Lincoln House, because they had little classes, So that's where we learned black history. But I was saying, we played, we went to school together. It wasn't until we got older and you start going to class reunions and people started talking more about their lives that they said, well, when we were in high school, we weren't allowed to dance with you. But we didn't know that. We didn't want to dance with it anyhow. So, that wasn't a big to-do. And I know once I got a call, and they wanted to know where I went to high school. And I said, Pottsville High School. And he said, well, why Pottsville High School? Oh, that was the only high school. He said, everybody went to the same high school. Everybody went to the same high school. We had 2 high schools, Pottsville High School and Nativity, Catholic High School. So, you went, but as you grew older, you remember, they had a birthday party. I wasn't invited. In school, you're all one, but they still had their own private lives, and we weren't a part of that. But, we had enough of our little group to keep us happy, So we didn't have any. My mother, I guess I wasn't even born then. She can remember them burning a cross up on Nativity, the Ku Klux Klan. And I've never seen that around in my lifetime but it was here.
There are 2 high schools in town. Pottsville High and Nativity is the Catholic high school. The Nativity that she said Nativity. She don't know what Nativity is now.
Okay. So you're saying at the Catholic high school, the Ku Klux Klan had set up a burning cross.
Yes. And that was made, oh my God, that was before I was born. So, but haven't heard anything like that in my lifetime. And I would imagine in your lifetime.
It was confusing to me when I was in elementary school, and then went to middle school, and I went on field trips with my little white classmates. We held hands. So they showed us films of what was going on in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was like, "Where is that?" Because that type of activity didn't exist in Pottsville. Now, the racism that existed then, it's still here now. It's perhaps a little less, but opportunities aren't quite as great as they should be. We progress. Um, there is greater acceptance. But for instance, in my high school experience, I was the person, and this is from my good friends. They didn't want me dating their daughter, I mean their sister, not based on them having a problem with it, but the acceptance that their parents had to have to tell their white friends, oh, you let your daughter date that black guy? That sort of thing is still prevalent here in Pottsville now. Racism is not overt, it can't be. So, but it's covered. So that sort of thing hasn't happened. My father's sister, my aunt Alma, and the word just escaped me. We had, you remember the counter in the early '60s where they threw coffee and it's very, I can't think of it. I'm embarrassed. It was just a little like luncheonette counter. We had that same store in Pottsville, and I was apprehensive when my aunt Alma took me there. I couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, so it would have been 65 or 66, and we didn't have a problem. We got some strange looks. I'll never forget it because I was aware of what happened at the same store down south. The setup was exactly the same, and it's just killing me. 5 minutes after this is over, I'll remember the name of was it Woolworth? I don't know. I'll be doggone. I'm sorry, but anyway, you live with that sort of stuff.
Well, the one thing, we had two girls graduated from Pottsville High School. One was number one, the other was number two. So they graduated and they went downtown to Woolworth at the time, but no longer exists, to apply for a job. And they were told they didn't think Pottsville was ready for a black clerk. And they didn't get a job. The only place they got a job was in the factory making red bowls. Because the one girl said, if I never see another red bowl, that's too soon. One is a doctor in research, and the other one is a professor at Ohio State. But they wouldn't hire them. I mean, they couldn't deny their grades, but they didn't have to hire them, and they did. So these are the things that were happening possible. And, you know, I guess at that time, we would say, well, what do you expect? Now the kids today don't say, what do you expect? They want to know why you didn't hire me. You know, it's a whole different thing. You don't accept that anymore.
Megan, we were asked at our last meeting who inspired you. And I didn't want to take the whole meeting up, but the true historian in this family was her oldest brother, my Uncle Freddie. Yeah, he was at the march in Washington. Yeah, we went to Atlantic City during the summer because there was only one beach, Michigan Avenue, that they allowed you to take food on. That may not have much significance to you, but in the 40s, not every restaurant let black people in. So the ordinance was relaxed so we could bring food. I wondered, growing up in Lily White Pottsville, why all of my friends went to Avalon and Stone Harbor and just all these other places in South Jersey, and we only went to Atlantic City. I don't know what they call the beach. Oh, the name of the beach, by the way, and it has been renamed this. My uncle was also there for that. I wish I would have been, but its nickname was Chicken Bone Beach. So
that's if you dug in the sand deep enough, you'd find a chicken bone.
Yeah, but he was a true historian who could tell you all the names of the people that started the Lincoln House. and why.
Merchant.
Pardon me?
I'm thinking about the man from the Lincoln House. It was Mr. Merchant. I just got that. Sorry.
Okay, but we don't know what Mr. Merchant's history was. You know, were they supported by the NAACP?
No.
I don't know those answers. You know that answer?
I think they were supported by a white group who paid their salary to have them come in here from Philadelphia, I think. And when my brother was doing some research on the Lincoln House, and he went to the Historical Society and was reading the write-up about the Lincoln House, and he told them then, half of that's not true. But they had to make it sound as though we were in desperate need. That's how they kept their job. And the guy from the Historical Society said to him, well, then you need to write the true story. Well, he never did, so nobody will ever know the true story, but when you do things like this and people will see it and said, oh yeah, it was there. But you know, it was there, but not like anywhere else. Like in Philadelphia, it was the same. You know, they had their black group and they formed. In Pottsville, we just said, well, what do you expect? And we went on our merry way. So.
I think it's really interesting that you point out what is being told about the Lincoln House now versus what was written down. And what a great example of how it depends on who's telling the history.
Right,
yeah.
That's exactly right.
And of course, when they tore the church down, the Lincoln House also, the whole area went along with it. Yeah. But I could say my life, even now, there's a lot of things that go on that blacks are not a part of. And I have to say, a lot of it is because they don't want to be a part of it. I go, well, when we could go, concerts, always, bus trips, always the only black women, because the other people just weren't interested in cultures, put it that way. But like I said, and as far as being purpose, yeah. I know there are parties and stuff that go on, and all my friends are there, and I didn't get an invite, and that's when you're grown, you know.
Another way to take a look at blacks being accepted. You got a lot of kids, kids of color, that went away to college. Within the Pottsville area school district, there is not one, to the best of my knowledge, one person of color teaching. And I'm talking about K through 12 that is of color. And to the best of my knowledge, it's been like that my entire life. And I came out of there in '76. So the opportunity for blacks really don't exist here. So those that went to college always sought their opportunity elsewhere, because this is just not the place. It was repressed. It is better in terms of blacks, but I think I mentioned at the meeting, when there's not a significant enough of a minority, white people don't care. It's the minority's job to fit in with them. So that's when we were talking about diversity training versus racial justice. I was with Chuck for racial justice, because I can't speak for the Allentown area, but at least here, there's not inclusiveness. I have one friend, he was the first, and to the best of my knowledge, only black councilman in the history of Pottsville. But he mainly was elected because there was some issues in high school with hate groups. It turned out to be just, yappy, yappy, yappy. We can get on the news if we say we're going to do this and do that. So there was sort of a racial coalition council as a subcommittee of city council, but he has long since been off, which would make him, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only black member or member of color of city council I've ever known. New York. And oddly enough, truth be told, it was the Republican Party that helped him get elected. He went to the Democratic Party. I wasn't living here at the time in Pottsville. He went to the Democratic Party. They didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to support him financially. Right. So the Republicans said, as long as you run on our ticket, all the up money that you need to register, to be a candidate, etc., will help you. And he did 2 or 3 terms as city council until they got tired of it. And left. So, he's still here in town, by the way. But, so when you take a look at the demographics of Pottsville, with all of the years that some black families like ours have stayed, there wasn't an interest, I would say, to become part of city government or be a teacher in the school system. Well, I'm sorry, but not to, how do you say it? There are no teachers, black teachers, in the school system. But in Pottsville, if your mother is a Spanish teacher and she's getting ready to return, that job would be yours. So you would stay there till they got out of college and they could take that job. Now you're talking about, what is it called? Patriotism and nepotism. Nepotism. I'm kind of confused. Go ahead. Well, you take the Spanish teacher for one. He was going to retire. He was really sick. But he didn't want to retire until his daughter graduated from college. And when she graduated, he retired. She got the job. And there's a couple others, I'd rather not mention their names because you might know them, who hung around until their kids. But even the white people were complaining about that. So, you in the popular school system, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So, if they're putting down their white children, blacks are not even in the picture anymore. So, we had no way to go to fight for it. So they went to college and they went away. And eventually the same thing happened to all of the white children. They don't come back after graduation, but Pottsville is not offering them anything anymore. There are no decent jobs. So, like I said, now, if you look at our church now, we have no young people. We have no crying babies. But all these people are in other places where they can get jobs. So we have a very old congregation. But he's a kid. We're the old ones.
So you both have shared some stories about race in Pottsville. Are there any personal stories that you would want to share about experiences that you've had?
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. There's such a small group that I guess to say, didn't care. The one thing now that it's starting is they're starting the NAACP chapter up here now. But when I was coming up, when they said I couldn't get a job in Barnwell, I went to Temecula. Well, I got tired of that job. I went to Deer Lake. And then I finally got a decent job. I went to Allentown, and that was back and forth every day. Because there were no decent jobs, decent paying jobs in Pottsville. So, you know, it's they're trying to build back up again, but there's really no place to go in Pottsville now. You can eat and you can drink. Can't work because there are no jobs. So. But I never let that really bother me. If I wanted to go, and it's a funny thing. If you're in a concert series and you sit in the same spot every time you go, people will start to talk to you. People will know your name. Now, if you miss a concert, they'll say, "Where were you?" But I'm only one out of all the rest of them. I said, many a times I'm sitting at concerts and I'm the only black person there. So, I mean, I'm a threat? I don't think so. I'm only one. But as far as I can remember, it's always been that way. Stories, like my father came here to work in the coal mine. And that's how we got here to work in the coal mine. And even then, you know, it was all the black people, men, they called them muckers. They would go through all the dirt and stuff until they got to the coal. Then the white guys would come in and they were the miners. They mined the coal. So our history goes back, but really, I don't know of any racial fights or uprising. It's like, you live there and I live here. We just don't bother each other. You do your thing, I'll do mine. So.
It sounds harmonious, but in actuality, it was, y'all stay in your place, we'll stay over here, and it's all good.
Yeah.
And to a certain, now, blacks have, there's more minorities here in town now, and they live all over town, which is shocking to me. The west side of town was always the privileged, really white section. Once upon a time in the 60s, it was actually a ski lodge in town. Well, black folks did not live on that side of town. I have a couple of clients that live out there, and it just shocks me that I see some black folks. I'm like, really? The area of that town's called Yorkville. And that was just such like an ivory tower of living where blacks just did not go. As I recounted, successful minorities, when they got out of school, they left and didn't come back. You know, hit the city. Yeah, because opportunity wasn't there. So.
But, you know, even like you say, you see the blacks living in the Yorkville area. Now the homeowners want people to come in because there is no superior whites. Not enough of them here to rent up there. These young people who are coming in and making a life for themselves, they don't want to live in Yorkville. They live Forest Hills or something, a different section of town. So when you see blacks moving in up there, that's because they couldn't rent to whites. And you wonder why I stayed here all my life? Because I like it here. Yep.
Well, there is not much violence here. It almost doesn't, crime almost doesn't exist in the winter, because those same 10, 12 families that cause all the ruckus in summer are home. It's too cold. Literally. When I went to college, I got a subscription to my hometown newspaper. And all of my new acquired black friends, most got the biggest kick out of my little 4 or 5 page newspaper. And I, kind of embarrassed, tell a very good friend of mine, his name is Bill Harper. He's a physical therapist in Pottstown right now. Came out of Pitt. He looked at me and said, look, he's from Washington. He goes, what don't you see in this newspaper? Crime, stabbing, shooting, outside of some fender benders. That's about it. So you better be happy. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but as far as for a significant amount of my childhood, which would have been the early 60s, I don't know that they even locked the door here.
Oh no, just recently did I start locking the door.
That's
I forget to lock it sometimes now.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be shared on social media, so let's not announce that your house is unlocked.
Oh, please. I'm a vicious dog. Oh.
Paul, is there anything that you would like to see change in the social and political atmosphere at this time?
Politically, I'm very happy that Joe Biden is in. I am saddened by how divided our country is and how I don't see us coming together anytime soon. One of the things that our previous president did is he brought everybody out the closet. You're a white supremacist, you're a nationalist, whatever you want to call yourself, it's fine to be out. So in one sense, I'm glad I know about actually some people in this town that I now know exactly, I really know exactly how they feel. Still friends, but I'm like, yeah, I got to watch my back because I don't want to get a knife in it. Figuratively, of course. I'm not talking literally. So I'm saddened about the division in our country. I have hope for the Biden administration. I know that the Republicans are going to fight him tooth and nail like they did when Obama was in. But I wish we could come together, but I just don't think that's likely. To me, it's very sad. But it's not likely.
The one thing, well, of course, all of my friends are white. But, what is it? Well,
the ones here in town, not your friends from Philly.
No, well, I don't even get down there. I'm talking about right here where I live all the time. And of course, I got a phone call and said, Eddie, call this number if you want to get flu shot. COVID shot.
COVID shot, yeah.
Right. And I said, how did you get that number? And she said, a friend of mine. But she never told me who the friend was. Now, I would like to know how many black people got their COVID shot in Paso. I think it was very minimal because they didn't know they were getting shots. And then when the word got down to them, they didn't have any more vaccines. So that's something I hope this NAACP will sort of pinpoint that as a project to make sure these people who don't get the paper, don't have television, know there is some place for you to go and get that shot. That they would be as informed as the white people. So, and that's what I would like to see happen, because I know it's not happening now. No way.
Now, part of that is there are so few of us, there's really no networking taking place. The black families that are still here know each other, but it's not like we've come together to have like an NAACP chapter. Or we, to the best of my knowledge, there is no minorities getting together to talk about the issues that affect us living in this town. Because I think of the sparsity of the minorities, and now a lot of the minorities that are in Pottsville, we don't know. as a kid growing up, I used to be able to name just about every black family in Pottsville. Those days are gone. So, people got up, got educated, and left. With the advent of, in the 80s, we built about 4 or 5 jails. Also, this is where cogeneration happened. So it brought professionals in, but they were all over the county. They didn't necessarily, like in the old days, well, where do all the blacks live and come to the fifth floor? So those days are over relative to that. But the sparsity of the minority population is such that there's no networking being done whatsoever.
Well, we are coming to a close, but I wanted to ask if there was anything else that you wanted to share.
I personally am happy for the subcommittee on race that you and I are members of. In my church, the Episcopal Church, which I'm very happy with. Because improvement, as much as our church family here in Pottsville likes us, there's still room for improvement. Like we've only been there 50 years. And maybe that's a reason why there has never been any more blacks in the Trinity Pottsville. There's no attraction, and there's one family. So
they have a lot of other little churches. It's called storefront churches that they go to. Like they come in and say, if they have 5 families, they all congregate because they know each other. So it's a big family. So when they go to worship, they have a big family. And the Methodist church that is still here, still operating, I don't know how, but they have very few members. I mean, but of course, they get a priest that comes in every Sunday. But then, you'll see people going around with flyers. They go to the different denominations, like we went to Episcopalians, maybe they go to Seventh-day Adventists. So we're spread thin. But then, if they're learning about God, I guess it's not all that bad.
All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you for speaking with me today. And I've learned a lot about Pottsville and your experiences there. And I applaud you for all your contributions to the church. And I'm really impressed that you've been in the Episcopal denomination so long. We're very fortunate to have you.
Yeah, we are certainly the western branch of the Diocese of Bethlehem. And with the advent of Father Kurt, who was just ordained, even when he was a deacon, and his relationship with Bishop Sean, prior to us getting Bishop Kevin, gave Pottsville some exposure because we are a solid church. And also to the point, there are some things that we do so well that people can model after us. We financially cannot afford a full-time priest right now, but there's 8 of us that are licensed lay readers. So we don't necessarily skip a beat. We would love to have a priest. We have visiting priests come in on a rotation so we can have our communion, etc. But yes, some of the numbers went down, but we never ever stopped having church and having a service just because we did not have a priest. So that
Good for you.
I'm quite proud of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, thank you again to both of you for sharing. And I look forward to meeting you in person someday.
Yeah, how about that? Instead of in a box.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
Megan, thank you so much.
Have a
Okay,
good
thank you.
day.
You too. Bye-bye.
enjoy the rest of your day.